Hello and welcome to the Arkham Sessions, the only podcast dedicated to the psychological analysis of Batman the Animated Series.
It's about a week after Comic-Con, which is honestly why you didn't hear a podcast from us last week. We apologize for that. This is, of course, the Arkham Sessions, brought to you by Comics Alliance. I'm Brian Ward, and as always, I'm joined by Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
Happy to be here. I'm sorry we missed a week.
I know. Although I will say the excuse was worthwhile. Comic-Con was pretty fantastic for me. What about you?
I agree. Probably one of the busiest cons for me, but also very enjoyable. We had an opportunity to meet a few listeners and folks that have met us or were aware of us through social media, but we haven't met yet in person. So It was really nice to meet some folks and get their feedback on the Arkham Sessions, get some questions. And one story sticks out for me, if I can take a moment just to kind of recognize a listener who approached me after a panel and said that he had been listening to the Arkham Sessions and recently was admitted to college, actually in your neck of the woods,
North Carolina.
I almost said Northern Carolina.
Yeah, well, it is Northern Carolina. It is the northern of the two. Yeah,
but north of North Carolina. The northern area of North Carolina.
Okay.
I believe.
All right.
And he decided to major in psychology and said that the Arkham Sessions kind of opened his world to psychology. He became very interested in the discipline. And he told me his story, and it was actually kind of a really cool moment to have. So I just wanted to mention that. And that alone is pretty, I think, kind of rewarding when it comes to our work together.
Especially when you think about the fact that you got into psychology because of Batman the Animated Series, and now someone else is getting into psychology through Batman the Animated Series and through your analysis of it.
Wow.
So it all sort of comes full circle. That's really awesome. A little meta.
It is meta.
We also you had 5 panels over the course of the week. I had 2, including one that you and I did together, which to me was the highlight of the week. It was our Psychology of Star Trek versus Star Wars panel. It couldn't have gone any better. I didn't think we would get 5 people in that room. I certainly didn't think...
Well, thanks a lot.
The reason I say that is because it's always been wall-to-wall packed. However, we've always been at a relatively reasonable time. I mean, we usually close out each day, so we'll have like a 7 or a 7:30 panel or whatever. It's usually been on like Friday night or something like that. This was at 8:30 p.m. on Saturday night of Comic-Con.
Yeah.
So we were up against Masquerade. We were up against Thrilling Adventure Hour. We were up against all of these different groups that, frankly, I mean, it's party night in San Diego. I thought for sure this was going to be the one time that no one showed up, and yet, packed house. So thank you to all of you who came, and I know some of you were listeners because you came up afterward and told us so, and we couldn't be any more grateful. I had just a ball during that panel. It was you, it was Dr. Ali Matu, your colleague, fighting Star Wars versus Star Trek, but then we also had Rod Roddenberry, Gene Roddenberry's son, and Sam Witwer, who of course everyone knows from Battlestar Galactica, The Walking Dead. He's the voice of Darth Maul in Star Wars: The Clone Wars. He was also in an episode of Star Trek Enterprise.
What didn't
he do? If it's nerdy, the man has done it. So it was awesome. But everyone was sort of fighting for the wrong sides. And
well, I think what happened is that we kind of we were able to take it to a level that went past that kind of versus, the superficial versus dynamic, and we really explored deeply the psychology of both sides in a way that I think was more inclusive and educational and even emotional for some of our panelists. So I think it was a one of our
and hilarious.
I mean, time.
it was hysterical. It was awesome, informative, educational, hilarious, heartwarming.
Yeah, and actually the full transcript can be found online on brainknowsbetter.com, which is
Ali's
my colleague's website. So you can find that, and coming soon is the full video of the panel as well.
And I believe Ali was even going to talk a little bit about the panel in the most recent episode of his podcast, Super Fantastic Nerd Hour. Mm-hmm. So if you want to hear it from the Trekkies' perspective, go and check out Super Fantastic Nerd Hour. I believe he and his co-host Conrad were going to talk about that. And we have just talked about it here, but there is video coming. So if you want to see the entertainment, be sure to check out our YouTube. But yeah, it was awesome. Thanks, everybody. And then Drea, you got the opportunity to do something that not many people get the opportunity to do. Luckily, because of this podcast and our association with Comics Alliance, you got to interview some pretty important people.
I had the absolute pleasure and the honor of interviewing Scott Snyder, who, of course, is the head writer of the Batman title for DC Comics, in addition to other very popular comics. And it was really, it's our affiliation with Comics Alliance that allowed me to have this opportunity to do a more psychologically relevant interview with him, to ask him, of course, about his current projects, but also to have a more, I guess, process-oriented discussion with him. So what is it like to really get into the minds of villains? How do you really get there? And how does that impact you? And he shared with me that sometimes he struggles and sometimes he does get burnt out. And he has a history of getting pretty low and down in the dumps and needing to reach out to his friends and even getting professional help. And he has a really great way of discussing how the content and the deep, dark topics that he delves into with the character Batman really has an impact on him psychologically, and how kind of that has a larger impact on his functioning as a writer, as a creator, in his career.
So if you thought that writing explosions and dying Robins and Jokers doing crazy things like cutting off their own faces, if you thought if you thought that it was just fun and games for a comic book writer,
it's not.
It's not.
No.
It's actually, it does take its toll on writers sometimes. You also got to interview the new team behind Batgirl.
Absolutely. So I had the chance to talk to Brendan Fletcher, Cameron Stewart, Babs Tarr. Babs is the artist for the new Batgirl comic book, and Mark Doyle, who's the editor. And it was a great discussion about this new chapter in Batgirl's life, and how really they're going to write stories that are just as rich, just as complex, truly relatable and developed stories, but with this newer, lighter kind of Batgirl, this newer outlook that she has. And and they say pretty frankly that they're closing the door on the darkness, that she's come out of that darkness, specifically her trauma. She moves to Burnside. She gets some new boots. She gets an awesome outfit, and she has some confidence.
I will say that I have been wary of the new direction. I am absolutely looking forward to reading it, as long as it happens within continuity, which I'm told in interviews that I've read that it does, that they're going to work in a way. Then I am on board, and as long as these guys tell good stories, they've got a reader in me, and I'm looking forward to see what kind of adventures Barbara can get herself into in this new town. So I'm looking forward to it.
I don't think we'll be disappointed based on what they said.
Yeah, and we've got to give a shout out to Brendan Fletcher, who is a listener of the podcast. So we were very excited to hear that. We stand behind you, Brendan. Godspeed.
Finally, before we get to our episode, I just wanted to acknowledge the New York Academy of Sciences, who right at the beginning of Comic-Con had called me and interviewed me about this show and asked how we could possibly learn about psychological science from a, cartoon. And they posted our interview. It was fun to do. I think it's also educational. So if folks want to look for it, we'll put the link up. But it's basically called Batman, Caped Crusader for Mental Health. And they talk about how we address mental health issues through the lens of course, our beloved fictional hero, Batman. And I just want to thank Tamara Johnson for giving us the opportunity to be a part of that.
Very cool. Let's move into this week's episode. It's an episode that a lot of listeners seem to be really excited about. We've actually gotten a lot of questions, a lot more than we have on most of our other episodes. And I think it's because people have really warmed up to this idea of Poison Ivy being one of their favorite in the Rogues Gallery. Maybe that could be because we're not entirely sure what's wrong with her. Drea, this is the second time we have met with Pamela Isley. The first time was in our 5th episode, and we saw that she had wooed Harvey Dent pre-Two-Face. She was on her way to wooing folks like Bruce Wayne, and she was using those charms, and not just her charms, but an actual chemical to attract the attention of male suitors, and ended up fighting Batman with, if I remember your words correctly, a killer vagina at the end of that episode.
Well, it was her larger than life Venus flytrap.
That's true.
Which looked very much like a female part.
Right. So the end of that episode was particularly important because during the podcast, we actually read her backstory per the original writer's Bible. Now, they didn't end up necessarily going with this story in terms of things that we did or didn't see in the episode. But I remember it talking about her as a child, particularly around the high school age, or just as a younger person. And she was very big on plant life and greenhouses and things like that. Then she was attacked by a few male folk who then ended up setting fire to her greenhouse. The whole trauma was basically relived when she fought Batman, and at the end of that episode, her greenhouse goes up into flames with Batman there. They end up putting her away in the prison. And she's allowed to keep her plant, which to me, we've discussed this, you wouldn't necessarily take it away from her. I think it's probably a danger. And, we have seen that in the couple of times since then that we've gone to Arkham Asylum, particularly as we've looked for the Scarecrow the couple of times, Pamela has been sitting there in her bed with her potted plant. She seems to be no harm. Until this week. So let's talk about eternal youth. We open the episode up, and there's a woman who is clearly fleeing for her life. She's running across the hills. She is passing topiary sculptures and all kinds of things in what looks like a garden. She goes into the woods, and there she is attacked by 2 or 3 women who seem to be wearing backpacks or some sort of engineered devices on their backs. They've got what look like fertilizer guns or something. They shoot her with a gas, and it turns out that this sort of gas ends up freezing her in a rigor mortis-like state, similar to a tree. We even start to hear sort of her body settling in this wooden-like creaking. And we see that the leader of this group is, of course, Poison Ivy. And she mentions that this woman is guilty of being the owner of a company who has leveled a 1,000-year-old forest for a strip mine.
That's evil.
So clearly this person has gone against the laws of nature in Pamela's eyes, and she wants her taken out. We cut from that really creepy moment of the woman being left there in her tree-like state to Bruce Wayne working out. He's on the phone. Alfred is behind him. Bruce is yelling into the phone.
I don't care how much money we'll lose. I won't have Wayne Enterprises involved in an operation that destroys a rainforest.
Now, this is the part where I get a little giddy, because you and I have discussed the difference between Batman, Bruce Wayne, and Bruce. Batman is the Dark Knight. Bruce Wayne is the character that is put on for the world.
Right. It's his like professional, social persona that he puts on to, to kind of distract people.
Yeah.
And to what I would say to function minimally as a citizen of Gotham.
And then Bruce is the combination of the two. He's the one that very few people get an opportunity to see. Alfred is probably the only one that we can think of who has really seen him. Oh, well, and Dick. Dick Grayson, I think, has seen Bruce.
And Dr.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Leslie
Tompkins. You're right. I feel like these folks have seen Bruce, some more than others. I think Alfred probably responds to Bruce or interacts with Bruce more than Dick Grayson or Leslie Tompkins. But this part I find to be particularly funny because he goes from the Bruce Wayne voice talking on the phone to Batman voice.
Shut it down or you're gone. One of my greedy directors made a deal with a slash and burn outfit in the Amazon.
Still dressed in his workout clothes, only talking to Alfred. So now it begs the question, maybe he is just really Batman, and the other roles are completely put on.
He's confused. He has some kind of identity crisis.
Maybe it's the adrenaline from the workout.
Yeah, well, maybe that kind of increased his heart rate, and he's summoning his Batman persona. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's an interesting. I think that's an interesting impression that you have, because now we know, which we've suggested, clearly Bruce Wayne is this character, this persona, and he even uses a different voice. But he's somehow transitioned more comfortably into the Batman voice. Yeah. To the point where the Bruce and Batman personas or identities might be more meshed. Yeah. And that's confusing.
He receives mail.
It says here you just won $10 million.
That's nice.
You also received a tape from some enterprise called Eternal Youth.
They put it in, and they're greeted by two lovely ladies, Violet and Lily, and they invite Bruce by name on the video to spend a weekend for free at a spa, at the Eternal Youth Spas, where this new anti-aging remedy has been created by Dr. Demeter, and you'll spend the weekend doing all kinds of youthful activities and just feeling renewed and rejuvenated. And Bruce doesn't really seem to have any interest in this. However, here is the perfect opportunity for us to be introduced to maybe a suitor of Alfred, Ms. Maggie Page.
Maggie.
Hello, love.
When Bruce suggests the two of them take the trip together, she is very keen on that. And apparently Alfred has been promising her sort of a trip that they could take together. And so they do end up taking this trip together like a couple. We've never met Maggie before.
They are a couple. She suggests that they've been dating. We know that they have different last names, so they're not legally married, but there is a suggestion that they've been romantically involved for some time.
I don't want to burst any bubbles here, but I'm fairly confident. Unfortunately, this might be the last time we see Maggie Page. So apparently, maybe the trauma of this episode broke them up. I don't know. I don't know what happened. You know, sometimes relationships, if I've learned anything from Keanu Reeves movies, in Speed, he and Sandra Bullock come right out and say that relationships started on traumatic events sometimes don't work out. And this one might be one of those cases. So, but they do end up taking the trip together, and they do end up getting rejuvenated because they meet Dr. Demeter. Now, they mention this in the episode, but I was particularly excited about this name because that's the Greek goddess of plant life, of plants. So
she looks very familiar to us.
Very familiar. I don't know, maybe a little, I can't quite place it. She's got red hair. She looks very doctorly. She might, maybe Pamela Isley. She could very well be.
Good guess.
Yeah.
I have developed this enzyme, Demetrite, the secret of eternal youth.
This new anti-aging drug is being put into the food. It's being put into the water. It's being basically everywhere you go. If you take a mud bath, you're being bathed by this this stuff called Demetrite. It's an enzyme that is taken directly from plants, and it's sort of we later find out chlorophyll-based. So it is legitimately rejuvenating these people. Alfred and Maggie seem to really dig it. And it rejuvenates their love life a little bit. Batman, meanwhile, is called away by Commissioner Gordon. All of these industrialists have disappeared. Batman realizes that the link between all of them is that they've all received an invitation to this spa.
Right, and his tape said to Bruce. So in the actual tape, those ladies who are trying to recruit him to come to that spa say his name.
Yeah.
So I imagine, all these other tapes say their name. They're targeting.
And he plays the one tape, and it does say,
"Hello, Mrs. Thomas."
So, yeah, they are targeting these people, and it turns out that these industrialists who have been missing were invited to spend weekends.
It's odd to me that the police did not find these tapes, or did they find the tapes and didn't watch them? I'm just trying to understand why they didn't see that as evidence, because each tape says the name of the target and the address of the spa is on there, the way to get there, all this information. So I'm a little surprised that Batman had to intervene to really get this solved.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. I gotta be honest. The detective part of you might go, hey, all these people have these tapes sitting on their VCRs, but we don't necessarily know that the others had them lying around. They could have put them in bags. They could have thrown them away. They could have done all kinds of things with them.
They could have recorded over them.
They could have put tape over the security part and recorded over them.
Maybe they wanted to record like
an episode
Family
of Friends.
Ties or something.
That's true. So I don't know. I agree with you. I think that it is a bit there in your face. However, we don't know how the others treated those videotapes. Batman, however, thinks that something's up. Alfred returns from his trip feeling rejuvenated. Batman returns to the Batcave and finds that the whole place is filled with plant life.
What's with the jungle?
Oh, I thought this drab old cave could use a little color.
I'm not going to lie, it probably did. It needed a little color. Alfred then seems to really need a drink of the spa water, of this Demetrite spa water. He takes a drink. He then ends up passing out. Of course, Bruce goes into detective mode. He analyzes the Demetrite, finds that it's a chlorophyll-based enzyme. It affects the human cellular membranes, and when combined with equal amounts of human plasma, it becomes twisted, violent plant life. We actually see it grab hold of Batman's arm. Alfred wakes up. He's feeling better. And all he and Maggie can think about is returning to the spa. They do. And then that's when we find out that Poison Ivy's, her task is basically to give these people ultimate rejuvenation, the promise of everlasting life. She hits them with a gas and they become trees. And not just trees, but like bark. Like we start to see, they start getting encased in bark.
I am Groot.
They are all Groot, yes.
We are Groot.
We are Groot. So we find out that Dr. Demeter is Poison Ivy.
Oh, shocker.
Oh my God. Batman gets really concerned because he can't find Alfred. Alfred! He thinks he knows where they are. He also knows that there's a serious problem with the plasma and the Demetrite. I'm a little weirded out by his decision, but he hang glides in. I don't know how much people know about hang gliders. You need to first get up to a level higher. You need to take the running leap. You need to jump. And you're literally gliding. There is no propulsion system. You're gliding through the air. You're riding the wind. If your closest ally might be turned into a violent tree life, is a hang glider the mode of transportation you're going to take to get to the spa?
No.
I'm thinking Batwing at the very least. Like, I got to get there fast. I got to get there now. I got to help my friend.
Maybe he thought that this would be inconspicuous. Like, this is probably the best way to get there because once he's there, he has to kind of sneak in and, locate.
There's got to be like a stealth mode on that Batwing or something. Oh, I don't know. But I found it a little weird that he's decided to use a hang glider. Batman goes to rescue his friend, and Poison Ivy says,
We both strive to see evildoers punished. But while you have your gallery of rogues, I have my grove.
And she points out her grove of trees, and they are all human-like wooden structures. And of course, Alfred and Maggie are both there. Drea, this is where my first real question comes in to play. Now, you've got a character here whose conviction is so strong that she is doing the absolute right thing. And she then, I don't know if she crosses a line so much as she never even realized the line was there. To her, this is absolute. Mm-hmm. Is there something that you can peg on her? Or is this just someone who is beyond mental disorder or behavioral disorder or whatever?
Yeah, well, we talked about her psychological characteristics in Pretty Poison, specifically mentioning that she's a bit complex.
Right.
And that, sure, we know that she's an eco-terrorist. We know that she believes very strongly in the rights of plant life and almost connects with plants more than she connects with humans. Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, she has a history of trauma where she was victimized by male humans and her plant companions were destroyed. And it keeps happening to her, actually. It happened to her in Pretty Poison when Batman destroyed her giant Venus flytrap, burned down her greenhouse.
She has a tendency of destroying, like if you remember, she shoots the bolt out of the little crossbow on her.
Yeah.
And she kills the Venus flytrap, if I remember, or at least shoots it, which angers her.
Which angers her more. Same thing happens in this episode where she's going after Batman, but as she's pinning his cape to a tree, she's remarking,
Look what you made me do.
Look what you're making me do to my tree.
Yeah.
As she's damaging its trunk. So I think that, surely she's destructive. Surely she endangers human beings. We all know people who are what we would call fanatics, or very connected and obsessed, or very someone who's devoted to some cause. It really could be anything, and they don't reach this level of irrationality,
right?
This level of destruction, this level of kind of breaking from reality. Like at some point, this doesn't make much sense to us. So we can talk a little bit about fanaticism and what that's like. But to answer your question, there really isn't any kind of behavioral disorder or mental disorder that fully captures somebody who's as obsessed with this mission as she is. Now, we know there are some what we call thought disorders or psychotic symptoms, where somebody has such a break from reality, believes so strongly in certain things. We talked about the Mad Hatter, for instance,
right,
who has this interesting delusion where he lives in Wonderland, he's the Mad Hatter, Alice loves him back, all these things that we know are not true. And that's better captured by some kind of psychotic disorder or psychotic symptom. Whereas here, there's this sense that she's not so much exhibiting some kind of delusion, that it's more about this, her devotion, her obsession with this cause to save plant life has become so singular, so focused, that it's kind of pushed away other more rational, more functional, pieces of a normal life. So it almost pushes out normality, and it just focuses on this abnormal obsession.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense, and she is out there. She is. It is scary. Batman puts it perfectly. She's an eco-terrorist, and she is clearly terrorizing those around her that she feels has wronged the Earth.
So we can talk a little bit about fanaticism. What is it? Again, it's not a mental disorder. It's more a kind of a cluster of personality traits, or a description of somebody whose obsession and devotion has really reached an extreme level.
Okay.
Now, as I said, many people are devoted to certain things, whether they're religious in nature, whether they're about politics, ideology. We are fanatics of comic books and, superheroes, one might say. So there's a spectrum.
Look, I'm not going to say that I'm a fanatic. I'm just going to say that comic books and superheroes are awesome. They're better than regular books. They're better than anything else. And if you disagree with me, I'm willing to kill you.
Fine.
But I wouldn't put myself in there with Poison Ivy.
Yeah, well, now you're sounding just like Poison Ivy in your very, very rigid way of thinking that you're right and other people are wrong. So yes, fanaticism. It's the unwavering conviction about absolute rightness of one's understanding. So again, it's not merely a strong commitment to a worldview or an ideology or a belief system.
Okay.
Or one might say it's not like most of us, who we just have a strong devotion to a sports team or to a comic book line, or to horror movies, or whatever it is that we are absolutely proclaiming to be obsessed with. This is an extreme version of that. A fanatic there are certain kind of characteristics that are a constellation of what we might consider to be, kind of a good representation of what a fanatic is.
Okay.
First one, fanatics seek to impose one's convictions on others. So how do we see that in Poison Ivy?
She insists that plant life is better and that you have to respect the plants as much as she.
She's led by total self-assurance. She does not need to learn more. She does not need to discover the truth. She does not need to hear you out. She is completely convinced that her way is the right way, and her mission is to either get you on board with this or to destroy you. There's also a sense of pride with her, right? That she feels, not that this is a burden, but that she is well-equipped and even, has a talent that other people don't have. So she's very proud of that and wants you to know she has this level of expertise and is the right one, is the chosen one to fulfill this mission in the way that it has to be fulfilled. Fanatics are also ready to sacrifice themselves for their ideals. Do we see that with her?
I don't know. I don't know that she's been given the chance, but she strikes me as someone who probably would. She would die for the plants. But at the same time, she's probably of the mind that if she's not there to protect them, no one else would be. So I don't know.
Right. And she sees the world, or at least Gotham, as imperfect and unholy. And she has to, again, she's improving upon, she's correcting. She's going after these people that are destroying, the rainforests and the plant life. And ultimately, we haven't seen her directly sacrifice herself, but we get the sense that she will do what she has to in order to save them.
Yeah. And I guess she's sacrificed herself in that she doesn't have a normal life. She doesn't have a normal... She's made other sacrifices.
Yeah, and you kind of see her interact with, well, there's a lack of interaction with her and her two female associates. They do a lot of the dirty work. They're spraying these people down with this toxic Demetrite. And you see her distance herself from them. Her interaction with them is very minimal. And she kind of, they're more of a means you know, to get this job done. And I don't think that she really cares about their well-being.
Right.
Fanatics, especially ones that are kind of destructive, like Poison Ivy is, have this dualistic worldview. So that's the us versus them mentality. It's the good versus bad. You know, again, it's kind of simplistic and rigid. So we kind of see that with her in this episode.
Absolutely.
She has people that are in her group, like her associates, and then people that are outside her group. The, the politicians and the folks, the Gothamites, who are destroying.
So you're with her or against her?
Yeah, and ultimately it's funny because when she encounters Batman, she has to suss that out and figure out what side he's on. Now she usually figures, now if you're against me in any way, if you get in my way, then you're on the other side.
Well, she clearly says, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
Absolutely.
And she goes after him. She actually says,
And I thought you believed in justice.
Justice, yes, but not the vengeance of an eco-terrorist.
and then she declares war against Batman, essentially.
Right, and she takes Maggie and Alfred saying that, well, if I can't have Bruce Wayne, because remember she's not going after Batman, she's going after Bruce Wayne.
Right.
She's targeting Bruce Wayne and figures, well, if I don't have him, at least I have the two people that are close to him or two people that are associated with him.
Yeah.
Because again, it's this black and white thinking, all or nothing thinking that she has. And finally, with most fanatics, there's this sense of the idea that devotion itself is more important than the object of that devotion. So the idea that my passion, my willingness to sacrifice, my dedication to this cause, that's more important. It becomes more important than the actual end result. So if you imagine what it is that Poison Ivy's doing, like ultimately she's making all of these people into living trees or potentially even killing them as they're transforming into trees. You know, like what does that really do? Is that saving the rainforest?
She is planting new trees.
Oh, that's true. That's true. So you almost begin to wonder, like, how is this fulfilling your mission?
Yeah.
What is this really getting to? Because sometimes we get the sense with Poison Ivy that just the action of defending the planet or defending plant life on the planet, that's what's important to her. And she doesn't so much think about the end result or what might happen if she engages in this kind of destructive behavior.
So clearly Ivy is headed down the path straight down the middle of the road of fanatic. She has hit that fanaticism trail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, if we think of this as a spectrum, that all of us might fall along the spectrum of being obsessed and devoted with something, and as we kind of near toward that extreme end of the spectrum, then you begin to see kind of some of these destructive, rigid, very focused types of thinking and behaviors.
Now, I have another question. it's more of an economic question. Why finance a really awesome spa just to turn people into trees with a chemical that later we see she shoots at Batman and says,
This spray is triple strength, Batman. It will start the transformation without any preliminaries.
why run a spa and create corporate videos and hire 2 people when really all it takes is luring them into some place and shooting them with liquid that turns them into trees right away? She's got to make the food. Mm-hmm. She's got to make the water. She's got to do the packaging of the videos and of the various substances, and she's got to pretend to be this doctor. Like, this is a really expensive operation for what boils down to, I've got a chemical that could do it right now.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure which one is more economically feasible.
Well, I think that it may get at what it is that's fulfilling to her about this particular crime, right? That something about that allows her to really showcase her expertise,
right,
and her scientific knowledge. It allows her to have some kind of power. It allows her to direct and instruct other people. It allows her social interaction. So I wonder if this is the minimal. I wonder if this is the minimal amount of interpersonal interaction that she can really tolerate before feeling threatened.
Yeah.
Especially if it's in the guise of this, professional helper.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting. You're absolutely right. There's a more direct way to get rid of these folks. But she does it in a way that may fulfill some of these other unmet needs. And it goes right back to fanaticism, or the idea of fanaticism, what that serves to do. So remember how I said this obsession, this dedication kind of pushes away other normalities. If you think about it, if you're spending all of your time and energy and emotion into something that's...
Oh, I get it. So she is spending all of this time developing this plan and creating this spa and doing the water and the food. That's feeding into her fanaticism more than the actual plant life itself. Like it's not even about the plants.
No.
It's about, I've got to create this thing that lures people in so that I can exact my revenge.
Right. Let's not forget she's really intelligent too.
Right.
So this is the way her brain works. She might be more inclined to come up with this really complex
I get
plan.
it. I buy in.
And so again, there's that sense of what is the fanaticism taking the place of or fulfilling. What is it that she might be avoiding?
Right.
Or what is it that she might be too vulnerable to really directly experience as a human being? So some people think that the reason fanatics are folks that are so dedicated and obsessed with inanimate objects and causes that are not really interpersonal in nature, not really social in nature, have to do with kind of either avoiding or not having to address real fulfilling interpersonal relationships, certain activities that most of us need to experience in life, development of our careers, ones that are actually realistic in our society. And psychologically, some people believe that somebody who engages in this level of fanaticism may be doing so out of some quest to understand their meaning in the world. So some kind of like existential curiosity or quest, or that they're avoiding some kind of danger or threat. So this quest that she has might allow her to avoid really addressing her own mortality, her own kind of experience as a human being. So that oneness with plants kind of keeps her, it kind of goes back to that eternal youth idea. It keeps her productive.
Okay, so I have another question, and this is about Bruce. And go with me on this one, because early on in this series, you and I would joke about how he might be a little emotionally vacant, or he might not fully understand emotions, or he might be on that antisocial personality disorder.
You said that last part.
I seem to remember you agreeing with me at one point. Maybe you didn't. But I have a question. At the end of this episode, because, of course, he takes out Ivy, she hits the tree, he knocks over the chemicals, it destroys the dome, the greenhouse, and, they fix the people. Alfred and Maggie are in the hospital. Bruce comes in, and he is carrying a potted plant. Maggie, of course, reacts like, ooh, maybe you don't want to bring that in here. And he goes, sorry, I didn't even think. And he then sets it aside. He goes outside. And she says,
Nice man, but sometimes not too bright.
Yeah.
Alfred responds, wide-eyed, he understands how bright Bruce is.
Yeah.
Now, here's my question. Bruce knows that bringing that plant in could potentially traumatize these two. He's not dumb. This was his little joke. He brought in a potted plant
Yes.
to joke with these people, and now he is like kind of twisting the knife a little bit. Like, he's sort of a sadist in this way, and that's why we get that expression from Alfred, because Alfred knows that Bruce knows exactly what he just did.
Yeah.
He potentially traumatized these two people who were nearly turned into trees.
Well, let's remember that you don't traumatize somebody. Like, this could also be part of our misunderstanding of what it means to traumatize someone. They were actually traumatized already from their experience.
So he's
with poison
triggering.
ivy. Right. So maybe a better way to put it is he possibly triggering them? Does he know he's triggering them? It's a planted act.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rooted in
Yeah.
troublemaking.
Yes.
And emotional distress.
Yes. He's barking in the
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, then we might be done with that one.
Okay. But I absolutely agree with you. I think he knows. I think Alfred sort of senses that as well. He's also, remember that he's a bit of a scientist. I think he also wants to kind of test, examine.
You are such an apologist for him.
No, I think that he also wants to examine how well that, Alfred and Maggie are, how they react.
Gosh.
And if they react very strongly or, have a panic attack or, seem to be really, really impacted by this little potted plant, that may mean a lot for their recovery, and that may mean Alfred should take some more time off. So I think Bruce is sort of checking in on their well-being.
No, he is clearly coming in being like, this is going to be hilarious. He has he has an inappropriate sense of humor in these situations. He threatened, his idea of a April Fool's prank was telling Alfred that he was going to dock his pay for the priceless vase that he broke during his gassed state. So,
and at the end of remember when Dick was suffering from some panic attacks, at the end of that episode, he also joked about
Batman is a little bit of a sadist. Yeah. Like, he's not a nice person, particularly to those he cares most about. Alfred.
That's how he connects with people.
Yeah. I don't know what disorder this is, but we're going to have to put our fingers on it. I want to go to a couple of questions. As I mentioned earlier on in the episode, we had a number of questions sent in by listeners on this one, and I thought a couple of them were absolutely fantastic. We got one from a listener named Elliot, who is, I think he's got to be someone who certainly knows a little something about psychology, because he sounds a lot like you in some of his email. And I mean that in a good way.
Oh,
like
good.
He is, like he knows his stuff. He's referencing things. He uses some of the words that you use.
He's one of my people.
He's one of your people. And he actually says that his email reads, a little bit about the show, but then says, as for the latest episode, I do have a few questions / theories about Poison Ivy and Alfred. Now, I can look past the GCPD's ineptitude in finding the connection between the missing persons and the Eternal Youth Spa, which is something you brought up as well. But what about Alfred's baffling inability to recognize Pamela Isley as Dr. Demeter upon arriving at the spa? Now, I'll take that one simply by saying it's Clark Kent disease. Her hair is pulled back. She's wearing glasses. Clearly, she's someone different. We're going to go with that.
I'll go with that too.
And then he also says that he finds it interesting that before being drugged by Isley, Alfred seems as disinterested in Maggie as Bruce is in regarding most of his female suitors. The life of Batman seems to have taken over Alfred's life and maybe his persona more than he tends to let on to Bruce. I don't know that I necessarily see that he's disinterested in Maggie. I think he's embarrassed to be having this relationship in front of Master Bruce. Like, would you agree? Like, he seems to blush. He seems to play it off a little bit. Mm-hmm. I don't know that...
And he willingly takes this trip with her.
And apparently he's been promising her things like trips and things like that.
I think emotionally and interpersonally, especially when it comes to relationships, I think Alfred has a higher level of functioning there than Bruce does. Alfred, of course, constantly reaches out to Bruce and is makes attempts to develop a stronger relationship with him. So I don't question.
And anyone who knows a Brit knows the British are not known for wearing emotions on their sleeves. So they'd
wear it on their faces like the rest of us.
I see what you did there. Nicely done. He's clearly got that British stoicism going. He's not necessarily going to just let you know how he feels at any given moment. You're going to have to work for it a little bit.
He's even going to drive in his car, and that has the steering wheel on the other side.
On the other side. She's got one of those left-handed steering contraptions over there on the wrong side of the car. Elliot also points out what we brought up earlier, and that's the Writer's Bible portion of our first encounter with Isley. He says that given her history of trauma as explained in the Writer's Bible, is it possible that, as she did not reconcile her past trauma by defeating Batman in that 5th episode, who also may have served as a proxy for her attackers from her past, Pamela has displaced her fear of her high school attackers and now sees a bit of them in Bruce as he has made her re-experience her trauma the last time they met? In other words, setting fire to her facility, nearly killing her and all of her plant life. Is this an instance of emotional transference?
I think that's very insightful. I think she certainly remembers her previous encounter with him. And although she doesn't reference it, she's pretty quick to want to destroy him. Although, again, I think she's more interested in going after Bruce Wayne, who has a direct association with funding a company that would destroy the rainforest, than specifically with Batman, who, again, she had a previous encounter with, who destroyed her greenhouse. Yeah. So, absolutely, he probably brings up some of those wounds, Yeah. But he's not as important. Remember, her mission is to go after those who are destroying plants.
Now, he brings up one final point in his email. As far as diagnosing Pamela, is there any credence in the possible diagnosis of delusional companion syndrome? I realize that this may be a bit of a stretch without proper medical history, but may be something to consider. Given her prior attack, where she may have sustained severe head trauma, her relationship with the wild thorny rose plant, which she was allowed to keep while incarcerated, as I mentioned, and her antisocial behavior, where she keeps herself at a distance from her associates and keeps the company of her plant instead, is it a stretch to posit her potential diagnosis of delusional companion syndrome?
I think that's an interesting direction. Delusional companion syndrome is a neurological disorder. It's not necessarily a thought disorder or psychotic symptom. Okay. It's a neurological condition. So that means that there was some kind of head trauma, as he mentions, or brain damage, or some kind of neurocognitive disease that led to this really bizarre kind of connection to something that's not a human being.
Okay.
Now, technically, delusional companion syndrome refers to this belief that you have this relationship or connection with an inanimate object, a non-living object.
So like a teddy bear, something along those lines.
And this is a really rare symptom. This is a really rare thing. I've certainly not encountered it at any point in my career. But neurologists are more often likely to encounter it. And it often accompanies other neurocognitive symptoms. And it sounds very bizarre, but again, it's a consequence of very specific neurobiological dysfunctions, and therefore it could happen to anybody. So he makes a good point, but Pamela has these relationships or connections with plants, and plants are living beings. Now, they can't communicate like you or me. They certainly are not human in any way, but they're living.
Yeah.
So, it would be a stretch to say that this is that kind of a condition.
She simply values their life
and
more than human life.
Yes. And delusional companion syndrome is part of a larger misidentification deficit, that somebody misidentifies. So they're making these neurocognitive errors in believing that something that's non-living has emotions, can communicate back with them, has, again, these human-like traits.
Meanwhile, we've seen that she actually, not all the plants, but certainly some of her plants do have the ability to at least understand her commands.
Those are legitimate communications.
Yeah.
Those aren't
delusions.
Anyway. No.
Gotcha.
No, so I think it's interesting to think about, but we don't have all the pieces there.
Gotcha. But it sounds less like delusional companion syndrome is the direction in which you would go.
Right.
Let's also check out an email that we received over at Facebook. This one was from our friend Mac, who a lot of people would know as Strange Like That on Twitter. She is a fantastic cosplayer, but you guys, I'm sure, have seen some of her amazing cosplay as Poison Ivy. She says, "Hey guys, so I realized that the next episode you're doing stars my favorite poisonous villain, and I have a question for you about the psychology of that character. I was wondering if there was an actual medical term for someone who prefers the company of plants, animals, etc. over that of humans. Obviously, there is the term misanthrope, but I don't think that's a diagnosable condition. Anyhow, curious to know, so Drea, is there a term or some sort of diagnosis you would give to someone who prefers the company of plants to human beings?
Not with that information alone. Like, that's certainly a very important part of the series of other symptoms that we've been talking about.
So as a child, I would rather spend time with my Transformers and G.I. Joes than the kid across the street. You can't diagnose me with something simply based on that.
No, because it's we look at that more like that's not necessarily a symptom. It could be a consequence of some kind of mental condition. It could be a completely normal part of emotional and social development, because all of us are drawn to non-living objects to some degree. So there's certainly nothing pathological about it in and of itself. But look at it within the constellation of other things that are going on. So we know, as we talked about in our 5th episode, that Pamela was exposed to direct trauma and victimization by the group of guys that burned down her greenhouse and terrorized her. We know that she's had some encounters with Batman that has been traumatic. We know that she has this very deep fanatic obsession with defending plants and trees and fauna. So she has that aspect to her. And we also talked about the fact that all of these connections and this dedication could keep her from really developing meaningful, purposeful, emotional relationships with human beings. That in and of itself, there's no like mental disorder associated with that, but one might say that that's problematic and potentially it causes dysfunction in her life. So it's enough to make us consider, could she benefit from treatment? Is this something that could be improved? Is this something that she wants to change? And is this somehow keeping her from really having a fulfilling life, that, really having a good quality of life? So these are all questions that I think are raised by that particular characteristic.
So something that comes to mind when we refer to the crazy cat lady, simply because she enjoys the company of her cats more than anyone else necessarily, it's not that she's actually crazy, unless she is. But that symptom alone would not... There would not be something wrong with the crazy cat lady.
There's nothing inherently pathological about living with, 20 cats. Now, you would question, does she believe the cats can communicate with her? Above and beyond the way that cats can communicate with us, right? Does she have deficits in other areas, emotionally, cognitively, socially? Are people reaching out to her and she's distancing herself? So, not everyone not everyone requires close, multiple friendships. Some of us are perfectly fine with just a handful or a couple of friends and spend quality time with non-living things or living things that aren't humans.
Right.
And again, there's really nothing specifically wrong with that unless it causes some kind of interference or dysfunction in your life.
So if you prefer plant life to human life, there's not necessarily something wrong with you. If it starts to become a problem, then you should seek help. That is from Dr. Andrea Letamendi. Thanks, Mac, and thank you, Elliot, for your questions. This has been a pretty enlightening episode, in my opinion. I very much enjoyed it. What about you?
Yeah, I always love to talk about poison ivy, and we don't really get a chance to do that too often. So it was nice to revisit.
All right, thanks, guys. Join us next week. We've got another episode coming up from Batman the Animated Series. But in a couple weeks, we might actually have something a little different for you. So
it may have to do with an animated film coming out on DVD and Blu-ray on August 12th.
That's right. So if you just happen to notice an animated film coming out on August 12th on DVD and Blu-ray that might involve Batman
and Arkham.
Wow, now you're just giving away the whole cow. All right. So you've got those hints. So, be on the lookout in a couple weeks. But until then, you can find us on Twitter. I am at bward028. Drea, where can they find you?
I am at Arkham Asylum Doc.
And you can find us both at Arkham Sessions. You can email us your questions about next week's episode. We are arkhamsessions@gmail.com, or you can find Drea over at her website, underthemaskonline.com. Drea, anything you would like to say before we wrap up this episode?
The DVD has Arkham in the title.
Oh, no. Now you're just... so much information. Guys, before she gives away the whole thing, I'm just going to cut it off right here. I am Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
And we are...
Assault on Arkham.
That is... oh my God. We are the Arkham Sessions.